In 1959, Ivan Baratov said, "When an athlete is training, his body undergoes stimulations which traumatize it, wear it down, tire it out, and even destroy it. If a recovery period follows these training sessions, then the tissues will be restructured and the athlete's body will come back not only to its former level, but even surpass this level in the case of a sufficient stimulus. If appropriate control measures are not used, such a preponderance of breakdown and buildup leads rapidly to injuries." This concept was called supercompensation by Baratov. This is the most important aspect of any system of periodization. It really is the essence of periodization, changing the intensity and volume to recover and supercompensate. Now, some of you may have seen my videos on how to program for maximum strength, and in this video, we're just going to focus on programming for weightlifting, specifically the snatch and the clean and jerk. As a disclaimer, these are guidelines only. Remember that each athlete is an individual, and it's more important to have either a coach or someone to check your technique to make sure you're doing things the right way, and adjusting your program depending on how you feel, and a bunch of different factors that I cannot control. We're going to go over this supercompensation concept as it's described in the USAW Level 2 manual. Now, the reason I'm using this manual is simply put because it's a Cliff Notes, very summarized version of what the greatest authors of periodization have to say about periodization. The most important thing to understand when programming is that you should have a base phase, a loading phase, a supercompensation phase, and then a performance phase. The terminology can be different to what you've heard. You could have heard load, overload, deload, and max out. Well, those are very similar concepts. In my opinion, of all the things that you can change and vary in your program, these things are the core things that you should probably not mess with. I'm going to give you a guideline on how to do this, but you could tell me to f off and go max out with your friends. So here's what the USAW manual calls for. It's very basic, and it doesn't account for each individual lifter's needs. And definitely stick around for after this breakdown, because I'm going to tell you how you can specify this type of program or something like it to your own needs. So the first 4-week cycle has the base, loading, supercompensation, and performance phase. Now, if you look at the base phase, it says to start at 3 sets of 3 with 70%. Now, we're going to talk about why these percents matter, but for right now, let's just look at how the program overloads. So you have 9 reps at 70%. So on the loading phase, you're going to increase the sets, and you're going to increase the intensity. Now you're doing 4 sets of 3 at 75%. We increased 5% and we added a set. Then you supercompensate. Now, the important thing about supercompensation, or at least in this model, it's that you have the lowest volume of the 4 weeks and that you have the lowest intensity. From there, you go on to your performance week. Now, this is the week where a lot of times people just max, and that's totally fine. But in this occasion, it's just the highest percentage lifts that you will do throughout the 4 weeks. Now, notice how it's still 2 sets of 3, and that's just because of the increase in intensity. The real goal here is to see how you perform. So it's not just to make you work. It's not basically the overload week or the loading week really facilitates that work. Now, you can do higher volume as well. That's totally up to you. But the reason why you probably shouldn't is because the way that you can flow into the next phase or the next block of training. Now, if you notice here, after performance, we're going back down in intensity. If you keep the base phase at the same level as the performance phase from before, you can accumulate too much fatigue. So what we're not doing is going, oh, we just hit a performance week of 80%, and now we're gonna go up from there. That's this example. You can go up from there. You can do whatever you want, but it is suggested that you go below so that you don't overload too much, because the next week after that, you're loading. So then you can see in this phase, they're doing sets of 2. So 3 sets of 2 at 75%. Then you're gonna load, so you're gonna add 5%. And you're gonna add 1 more set, so you're gonna do 4 sets of 2. Then you're gonna supercompensate. And we want that supercompensation phase to be the lowest intensity of the block. We also want it to be the lowest volume of the block. And finally, your performance phase, we want to see what you can do. So you do 2 sets of 2, but it's the highest percentage. Now that goes on as well into the 3rd cycle, which will be all singles. Now, this is the very basic way to program your snatch and your clean and jerk over the course of weeks. How to increase them without thinking along the same lines as your maximal movements, your max strength movements like the back squat, deadlift, and bench. So here's what I do when I look at something like this. I try to optimize it. One thing that I do straight off the bat is on each performance block, I like to do what's called a plus set and not an AMRAP set. I like to just see what I can do on that day. Instead of 2 sets of 3 at 80%, I'll do 1 set of 3 at 80%, and then I'll do 1 set of 3 at 80+%. So basically, that 1 set of 3 is up to me. I can go up if I would like. If I want to do 4 weeks of triples or 4 weeks of sets of 3, I'm actually going to base that off of my best triple. Or in the case of the clean and jerk, I don't like to do triple clean and jerks. I like to do 3 cleans, 1 jerk. I can kind of base it off of that complex. I can do this with pretty much any movement I want, but in my previous video where we talked about max strength, I use the rep max chart. That's the way that I can program. So if I wanted to do sets of 3 in the back squat, I would just look at my 3 rep max on the chart and I would program off of that. Well, you can't do that with the snatch and the clean and jerk. So my best triple is 121 kilos. It was a pretty crazy day, and to be honest, I think that's a pretty high number for my triple, considering my best snatch is 132 kilos. So what does this mean? Well, if I was to program starting at 80% of that, and the reason why I would start my program at 80% is because when you start to go below 80% for your working sets, you start to lose the stimulus of just the central nervous system. You kind of lose the purpose of Olympic weightlifting. Not to say that those aspects can't be used in Olympic weightlifting, especially early on. It's just that you start traveling further and further away from the point of the sport. So if I'm going to start at 80% of 121, well, what I'm really doing is starting at 73% of 132. Okay, so in essence, we're able to use relative intensity, but with actual maxes that we've hit before. This is commonly called like rep cycling. It's used all the time, and it works tremendously well with the classic lifts. So let's just stay with the same protocol as USAW. 3x3 at 80% of my 3 rep max, or 73% of my 1 rep max. Then I'll go up to 4 sets of 3 at 85% of my 3 rep max. Then I go down to 75% because that's the lowest percent of the cycle. And I'll do that for 2 sets of 3. Then I'll try to do a performance set where I would do 90%, and I would do that for 2 sets of 3. And I could actually do 1 set of 3 at 90%. And then I could try to PR. I could go for a heavy triple. I could go for a new PR triple. The issue comes when people are like, well, how many times should I program a snatch per week? How many times should or where should my back squat fit in with my snatches and clean and jerks? Where should my pulls fit in? All this crazy stuff. So because I don't want to go too much into the microcycle structure, I can offer you guys some programming. It is on my Patreon account. It is for just $1 a month, and you can get, I think, 3 or 4 programs. There's a squat program. There's a bunch of good stuff, but most importantly, there is my Supercompensation program that I have customized for my lifters, basically to optimize all aspects of the training. And there you have a structure from top to bottom, from Monday to Sunday. Every movement is included. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have questions, please comment below. I will try to answer as many comments as I can. If not, you can go to my Discord and you can try to ask me questions there. I'm going to link that in the description as well. That is all I have for you guys. I will see you on the next one.